Hey gang, Mark LeBlanc welcoming you back to the Alley Cat Workshop. Today is Friday, February 25th, 2022, and I'm very excited. Today is the first day in the actual build of the dresser. Let me show you what I plan on getting done today.
So as a reminder, this is what the dresser looks like. There are 3 cabinets on the bottom, one on the left, middle, and one on the right, 3 on the top, and there's this huge counter on top of everything. What I plan on tackling in this video is the structure of this middle cabinet over here. Now, let's turn this SketchUp file around, and let's see what that means. That means that I'll be looking at this wall, the other wall, corresponding wall on the other side, a middle shelf, a brace, a bottom shelf. There will be 2 braces as well on the bottom here. And there's also a, I'll call it a frame that will be used eventually to secure the counter to the piece of furniture. So that's the plan for this video. Let's get started.
All right, my first job is to cut down, break down this sheet of plywood. Now the plywood that I buy is this nice birch plywood, and I buy it in sheets of 30 inches wide by 60 inches long. And the only reason I buy it this way, I realize it's a little bit more expensive, the only reason why I buy it this way is because it fits in my car. And the other big advantage as well is I can manipulate it a little bit easier inside the shop. So I've got my Bora track guide installed. I got my circular saw all dialed in. I'm ready to make my first cut. That cut is going to be a 35 1/4 inch.
The front of each of the walls is cut at a 45-degree angle. So I set my table saw blade to 45 degrees and made a first cut. Then I reset my blade to 90 degrees and cut the other side of the wall to final length.
So for the last little while, I've been taking a look at my plans. I've got my detailed measurements and notes with regards to all of these, my cuts. And what I've been doing is I've been laying down lines for the top rabbet, the middle dado, and the bottom shelf dado, as well as a back rabbet. This panel is going to be, if you look at the cabinet from the back, this is going to be the right-hand side wall. And over here, I've got the left-handed side wall. So I've laid down lines for those dados and rabbets on both panels. I've also laid down, for example, in this dado, I've laid down a line 1/4 inch away from the top of where I want my dado to finish. And that is an alignment line that I will use for my router guide, my Bora router guide. If you're not familiar with what I'm doing here, there is a video that I shot, and I'll put a link right on the top right corner that will explain what I did here. If you look at the end of that video, you'll see an explanation. So, all right, I am ready now to cut these dados and rabbets on both panels. I will do the large, almost 3/4 inch dados and rabbets using the router, and I will probably use my table saw for the rear rabbet here. It'll be easier to do it that way. Let's start with the router.
This Bora router guide is a godsend. It worked fantastically well for this build. The way it works is that you use a sample piece of wood to set the width of the dado instead of doing a whole lot of measurements. It works so well that I ended up using the system for the rabbet along the back edge, even though I had first cut it with my table saw. The router provided a much better quality cut than the table saw. I'm seriously considering forgetting about my dado stack for any future dados or rabbets. A Bora router guide just works way too well.
I'm almost done building the left and right walls of the middle cabinet, and using the router and the Bora router plate guide. Fantastic. The dados are good. They're the right width, so it's a snug fit with the sample piece that I've got. It's looking really good. Now, one problem that I'm seeing is because of all the manipulation that I've done with these panels, they're starting to see some dirt on the surface, for example, this mark right here. So what I'm going to do is something that I don't usually do, but I'm going to give this a light sanding. I don't want to get rid of the veneer that's on top. So just to clean things up a little bit. And then I'm going to put one coat of floor varnish, which is going to be the finish I'm going to eventually put on this entire piece of furniture. And that's to protect it, to protect the visible part. So this is the part that's going to be visible from the inside of the cabinet, and just to prevent it from getting any dirt on it or additional issues. So, light sanding, 220 grit paper, one coat of finish, and then I'll start building the shelf.
So the bottom shelf is 4 feet long by 30 inches wide. Lucky me, my boards are 30 inches wide already. So all I had to do is cut it to length. Next, I used my jigsaw to nip the front corners of the shelf. And then I used the Bora router guide to cut 2 dados on the bottom for support braces and 1 partial dado on the top. Next step is to build the frame that will go on top of the cabinet, just under the counter. I built this using 2-inch wide strips of plywood, which I cut at the table saw. Now the trick here is that the frame needs to be the exact same size as the bottom shelf. So I used the bottom shelf as a guide to verify that I was cutting my pieces to rough length.
So what you're seeing here is the bottom shelf, and you're also seeing what I call the top brace system. So this is going to go right underneath the counter, and it's going to allow to do a number of things, including securing the counter to the piece of furniture. So this is made with 2-inch wide pieces of plywood, and although I've transferred measurements from SketchUp, obviously, or sometimes things aren't exactly perfectly perfect. For the most part, my pieces are slightly longer. This one in the back is just a bit short, but who cares? It's not going to make much of a difference. But these pieces, the other pieces, are just slightly longer. So what I'm going to do, if you notice over there, I've got my shooting board and my shooting plane all set up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shave off a little bit at a time, just so that I get a perfect fit. The goal of the brace, the top brace, is it needs to be perfectly aligned with the outline of the bottom shelf. Because that will make the piece of furniture or the cabinet nice and square. So the goal today is to shave off whatever's needed, build that frame system. I've got a couple of pieces that are at different angles that I need to cut. And yeah, that should be it. Now, when I've got the top brace system built, then I'll be able to do possibly a first assembly. That should be pretty exciting to see what this is going to look like for the first time. All right, let's get started. I now need to cut 2 short pieces that are going to have different angles on them. And what I've done is I used this tool gun. I don't even know what this is called. It's the first time I ever used this. And I've had this for years. It came as a kid. I think there was my level in there. There's a bunch of little measuring tools, but this came with it. and I've never used it. First time. So what I've done is I've established the angle that this corner is at, and I've transferred that angle onto my miter saw. So I'm going to make a couple of cuts so that I get the first angle here, and then I'll get the second angle, cut it to length, and then we'll go from there. It's coming together. It's good. It's all good. Interesting lesson here. So I cut two pieces. This one is, as you see, it's completely cut with both angles, but here's what I found out. I took my first measurement on this angle, right? Here you go. Put this upside down so we can get access to the screw. Get this, get the angle, set the miter saw, make the cut. I was expecting the piece to work on this angle. No. That piece, or that cut, worked perfectly well. Whoops, let me flip this around. For this corner. And then I took the measurement for this corner, put that on the miter saw, made the second cut, and that worked very well for this corner. All right, those of you that don't know this, I have a math degree, and I can't figure this out. So I'm not going to fight it. Those days are over. This piece is slightly too long, so I'm going to go back to the shooting board and make my adjustments, but I've got my two angles, and I can basically set my piece together and finish my frame. I'm not going to argue with it. Let's put it that way.
Once all the pieces of the frame were cut and adjusted to final length, I used my pocket hole jig to allow me to assemble all these pieces. Pocket holes are going on the top side of the frame, so they won't be visible as they will be facing the counter.
Well, good morning and welcome back. Today is the 4th of March, 2022, so I haven't been here in a couple of days. Today, by the way, would have been my dad's 86th birthday. And my dad was an avid woodworker himself, and it's too bad we never really got a chance to work together. And I could just imagine his reaction if we would have some time to share together in this workshop. The way it's equipped, the space that we've got, we would have had a lot of fun together. All right, so I put a couple of coats of varnish on my base. It looks pretty good. This morning I came in, I used some craft paper and did a light sanding just to buff it up, and it looks pretty good. Eventually there will be at least a third coat, maybe even a fourth. We'll see. So I'm getting close to assembling the first cabinet. A couple of things I need to do. I need to plan for pocket screws for when I assemble the face of the piece of furniture. And so I'm going to turn this around eventually, and I'm going to attach or drill in some pocket hole screws on this face and on the corner faces as well. The other thing I want to do today is I want to install braces. I cut some dados, if you recall, on the underside here. They're 3/8 of an inch deep, which is perfect, so I need to cut in 3 5/8 inch high pieces of plywood that go 30 inches wide, so that it will support the weight of all the dishes on the bottom shelf. That will also give me a more stable base for when I do the assembly. So I'm almost ready to do the assembly. Hopefully by the end of today I've got that done, and I can call the first cabinet pretty much done, at least for the first phase. And then I can move on to the left and right cabinets as well. So far, this has gone on quite well. I'm very happy with it. It's just, time to continue.
Before I assemble this cabinet, I'm going to pre-drill holes in each of the dados And that way it's going to take out any of the guesswork as to where the screws need to go.
I am finally ready to do some assembly. It's going to be a little tricky. We'll see how it goes. So what I've got is I've got one of the sides flat on the ground here, and I've got the bottom on its edge at a 90-degree angle, and I've been able to enter the bottom inside of the bottom dado. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is very carefully flip this over, clamp everything down, and drive in some screws so that the bottom is going to be secure. And then I'm going to install the other side. Not sure how that's going to go yet. Alright, so bear with me. Maybe I'll install the top. We'll see. But since I'm working alone, I need to take this one step at a time. Alright. Here goes nothing. Well, that went quite well. Alright.
Getting the bottom shelf to fit in the bottom dado of the other wall was a lot more tricky. I had to get the alignment started on one side and then use my longest pipe clamps to wedge the pieces together. I also had to use some persuasion, if you know what I mean. Now in the end, I was able to verify that everything was square and could secure the cabinet with some screws. The top was also a challenge. I ended up using a bunch of clamps to secure it to both walls, and then it was pretty easy just to drive everything and assemble everything with screws. I can now start to work on the middle shelf. It's pretty easy. It's rectangular, 4 feet long by 16 inches wide. I also needed to cut a partial dado 15 inches long on the underside, and that was to accept the supporting brace. If you recall, I had one on the bottom shelf, and the challenge here is that both dados need to match in terms of position. I also needed to create a notch on both ends of the shelf. That way you can see the dado which the shelf sits in. I used my pull saw to cut these notches. It was faster and cleaner than with the jigsaw.
All right, so I just finished installing the middle shelf and the middle brace. I had to cut notches, obviously, so that you don't see the dado cut by the router. I had to do that on both edges of the middle shelf and also on the brace top and bottom. So this middle cabinet is where I want it to be. And that's where this video is going to stop. Next time I'm going to start working on the left or the right cabinet. Not sure which one, but that's where I'm at. And start putting these things side by side and closer together. Very happy with this build. It's looking very nice. Now next thing I do, I won't put this on camera, but I'm going to put a couple of coats of finish on the shelf on both faces and also on the brace that you see at the bottom here, and I do need to put a front to hide the plywood, but that's going to happen a little bit later on. All right, folks, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Click that like button. You know what to do. Leave me a comment. Whatever. Talk to you soon.